The Great Hall of the Galactic Council was the most impressive building in the known universe. It floated in the empty space between three star systems, a massive station made of white metal and crystal that caught the light of distant suns. Inside, the hall could hold 10,000 beings from 100 different worlds. Today it held only the 12 high arbiters of the council and their assistants, and one human woman who stood alone in the center of the floor. Ambassador Elena Vasquez was 53 years old. She had gray hair that she kept short and deep lines around her eyes from years of smiling and years of worry. She wore the simple blue uniform of the Human Diplomatic Corps, without medals or decorations. She had learned long ago that the alien species of the Council did not respect human symbols of achievement. They barely respected humans at all. She stood on the speaking platform, a circle of light in the middle of the dark floor. Above her, arranged in a half circle of elevated seats, the 12 high arbiters looked down at her. Each one represented a species that had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years before humans had even discovered fire. High Arbiter Kethron of the Velthari sat in the center seat. He was tall and thin, with skin like polished silver and eyes that glowed with soft blue light. The Velthari were the oldest species in the Council, and they had never let anyone forget it. Kethron had been High Arbiter for 200 years. He had seen human ambassadors come and go. He had denied every single one of their requests. Today would be no different. He was certain of that. Elena looked up at the 12 faces watching her. Some showed open contempt, others showed boredom, a few showed something like pity. None showed respect. She had been doing this for 20 years. 20 years of standing in the same spot, making the same arguments, receiving the same answers. 20 years of being told that humanity was not ready, that humans were too young, too aggressive, too unpredictable, that they needed another century of observation, another century of probation. 300 years. That was how long humans had been part of the galactic community. 300 years since the first Velthari ship had appeared in Earth's sky and informed humanity that they were not alone in the universe. 300 years of being treated like children at a table of adults. Elena took a deep breath and began her prepared speech. "Honored arbiters," she said, her voice calm and clear. "I come before you today to present, once again, humanity's petition for full membership in the Galactic Council. As you know, humans have been classified as a probationary species since first contact. We have fulfilled every requirement placed upon us. We have maintained peace within our territories. We have contributed to the galactic economy. We have shared our technologies freely, as required by the Probationary Species Act." She paused, looking at each arbiter in turn. "We have done everything asked of us, and more. Our medical research has eliminated 17 diseases that once plagued Council worlds. Our engineers designed the quantum relay network that allows instant communication across the galaxy. Our economists developed the stabilization protocols that prevent crashes in the galactic credit. Our agricultural scientists created the soil enhancement microbes that feed 12 billion beings on 100 worlds." High Arbiter Kethron made a small gesture with his long silver fingers. It was the Velthari equivalent of a yawn. Elena continued, her voice steady. "We do not ask for special treatment. We ask only for what the Charter of the Council promises to all species: equal representation, equal rights, and equal respect. We ask to be judged by our actions, not by our age. We ask for a seat at this table that we have helped to build." She stopped speaking and waited. The silence stretched on for a long moment. Then High Arbiter Kethron leaned forward in his seat, his glowing blue eyes fixed on Elena with an expression she had seen many times before. It was the look an adult might give a child who had asked a foolish question. "Ambassador Vasquez," he said. His voice was soft and musical, the way all Velthari voices were, but there was no warmth in it. "We have heard this petition before. We have heard it every year for the past 50 years. The answer has not changed." He gestured at the hall around them. "Look at this place. It was built by the Velthari 12,000 years ago. 12,000 years, Ambassador. When we built this hall, your species was living in caves and hunting animals with sharpened sticks. The Morvathi were sailing wooden ships across their oceans. The Kethvor were just learning to grow crops." He smiled, showing teeth that were small and perfectly white. "We do not doubt that humanity has potential. You are clever creatures. You learn quickly. You adapt. These are admirable qualities. But 300 years is nothing. It is a single breath in the life of a civilization. You are still learning. You are still growing. You are still in every way that matters, children. Elena felt the familiar weight of frustration settling in her chest, but she kept her face calm. She had learned to do that very well. With respect, High Arbiter, she said, the Council Charter does not require a minimum age for full membership. It requires only that a species demonstrate peaceful governance, economic stability, and cultural development. Humanity has demonstrated all of these things. The Charter is a guideline, Cathron said, waving his hand dismissively. It is not a contract. The Council decides who is ready for membership, and the Council has decided that humanity is not ready. May I ask what else we must do to prove ourselves? Cathron's smile widened. You must learn patience, Ambassador. That is what you must do. You must learn that the galaxy does not revolve around human desires. You must learn your place. He leaned back in his seat, his silver fingers steepled in front of his chest. Humans are guests in this galaxy. Guests do not demand seats at the table. They wait until they are invited, and they are grateful for whatever they receive. The other arbiters nodded in agreement. Some of them were not even paying attention anymore. The Morvathi arbiter was checking messages on a small device. The Kethvor arbiter had closed his eyes, possibly sleeping. Elena stood very still. She had heard words like these before. She had heard them for 20 years. Each time she had argued. She had presented evidence. She had appealed to logic and fairness and the principles of the Charter. It had never made any difference. She thought about the message she had received that morning before leaving for the council chamber. It was from the president of the Human Confederacy. It contained only one instruction. If they refuse again, come home. We will take a different path. Elena had known this day would come. She had hoped it would not. She had spent her entire career believing that she could change minds through words, that she could prove humanity's worth through patience and persistence. She had been wrong. She looked up at Kethron, at his smug silver face and his glowing eyes that had watched 1,000 species rise and fall. She thought about all the time she had stood in this spot, asking for something that should have been given freely. All the time she had been told to wait, to be patient, to remember her place. Very well, she said. Her voice was different now, quieter, calmer. The frustration was gone from her chest, replaced by something that felt almost like relief. Kethran blinked. He had expected more arguments. More pleas. The human ambassadors always argued. I beg your pardon, he said. I said very well, Elena repeated. We understand our place now. She smiled then. It was a genuine smile, one that reached her eyes. The arbiters did not know what to make of it. I will convey the council's decision to my government, Elena said. I thank you for your time and your honesty. It has been most instructive. She bowed a deep and formal bow, the kind reserved for final meetings. May your species prosper, she said. It was the traditional farewell of the council, the one spoken at the end of diplomatic relationships. Then she turned and walked out of the great hall. She did not look back. The news spread quickly through the human colonies. Ambassador Vasquez had ended the annual petition. She had not argued. She had not protested. She had simply accepted the council's decision and walked away. Many people were angry. They wanted to know why she had not fought harder, why she had given up so easily, why she had bowed to those arrogant aliens who had been treating humanity like dirt for 3 centuries. But those who understood what was happening were not angry. They were busy. Within 1 week of Elena's return from the council, the Human Confederacy issued a quiet announcement. It was not broadcast on the main news channels. It was not discussed in public forums. It was simply posted on official government sites, where only those who were looking for it would find it. The announcement said that humanity would begin a process of voluntary disengagement from the galactic community. All human citizens working in non-human territories would be offered free transport back to human space. All human businesses operating under council licenses would begin a gradual shutdown of operations. All human technologies licensed to other species would be allowed to complete their current contract periods, but no new contracts would be signed. The council noticed the announcement, but they did not take it seriously. Species threatened to leave the galactic community all the time. It was a common negotiating tactic. They would make a show of packing up, wait for the council to offer some small concession, and then gratefully accept it. But the months passed, and no demands came from human space. No requests for meetings, no new petitions. Just silence and the steady movement of ships heading toward the galactic rim. The human colony on Varath Prime, a major trading hub, closed its doors and loaded its 50,000 residents onto transport ships. The human-run hospital on Morvathi Secundus transferred its patients to local facilities and shut down. The human engineering teams that maintained the fusion reactors on a dozen space stations collected their tools and went home. Some council species were annoyed. Finding replacements for human workers was difficult. Humans were willing to work in places that other species considered unpleasant or dangerous. They were good at solving problems. They did not complain about long hours or difficult conditions, but annoyance was not concern. The galaxy had existed for billions of years before humans arrived. It would exist for billions of years after they were gone. If the humans wanted to sulk in their corner of space, let them. There were plenty of other species to fill the gaps they left behind. High Arbiter Kethron heard about the human withdrawal during one of his daily briefings. He dismissed it with a wave of his silver hand. "Let them go," he said. "They will be back in a century, begging for another chance." Humans are like that. They cannot survive without the resources and trade that the Council provides. Their pride will fade when their economy begins to suffer. His advisors agreed with him. They had no reason to doubt his wisdom. He had been right about everything for 200 years. Elena Vasquez stood on the observation deck of the transport ship, carrying her back to human space. Through the window, she could see the stars of the galactic core, brilliant and thick, giving way to the thinner scattering of the rim. She was 65 years old now. The years of diplomacy had aged her more than they should have. But standing here, watching humanity's last ships leave Council space, she felt younger than she had in decades. A young aide approached her, a tablet in his hands. "Ambassador," he said, "I have the final numbers. All human citizens have been evacuated from Council territories. All business operations have been concluded. All contracts have been fulfilled or transferred." "And the technical teams?" Elena asked. "Gone. The last maintenance crews left their stations yesterday. Everything is in the hands of local operators now." Elena nodded slowly. "How long do you think it will take them to notice?" The aide thought about it. "The agricultural microbes will start degrading in about 6 months. The quantum relay network will need its first maintenance cycle in 8 months. The fusion reactors," he shrugged. "Some of them are already showing minor fluctuations. The local crews don't seem to understand the calibration procedures." "They never asked," Elena said quietly. "In 300 years, they never once asked how any of it worked. They just assumed it would always be there." She turned away from the window. "They called us guests," she said. "They were wrong. We were never guests. We were the people who kept the lights on, and the food growing, and the messages moving. We were the foundation they built their comfortable lives upon, and they never even noticed." The aide looked uncertain. "Do you think they will suffer?" Elena was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know," she said finally. "I hope not. Despite everything, I don't wish them harm. But I know this. They will learn something important. They will learn what it means to lose something you never knew you had." She walked toward the door of the observation deck, then paused. "How long until we reach the new settlement zone?" 2 weeks, Ambassador. The advanced teams have already established basic infrastructure. The new capital is being built as we speak." Elena smiled. "Then we have work to do. A whole new chapter of human history, and this time, we write it ourselves." She walked out of the observation deck without looking back. Behind her, the stars of the galactic core grew smaller and smaller until they were just another patch of light in the endless darkness of space. The humans were gone, and the galaxy was about to discover what that really meant. 6 months had passed since the last human ship crossed into the uncharted territories of the galactic rim. 6 months of quiet in the great halls of the Council. 6 months of smug satisfaction among the elder species who believed they had finally put humanity in its proper place. High Arbiter Kethron had stopped thinking about humans entirely. He had more important matters to attend to. The annual Festival of Stars was approaching, and the Velthari were hosting this year. It would be a celebration of 12,000 years of galactic civilization, a reminder to all species of who had built this community and who still ruled it. But in the agricultural worlds of the HFY hegemony, something was going wrong. Governor Thexara stood in the middle of what had once been the most productive grain field on the planet. Now it was a field of brown stalks and withered leaves. The crops that should have been golden and ready for harvest were dead. Not just dying, dead, and no one could explain why. She knelt down and pulled one of the stalks from the ground. The roots came up easily, and she could see that they were soft and black, rotting even as she held them. "How many fields?" she asked the agricultural minister standing beside her. He was a nervous Keithfor, his forearms constantly moving, his large eyes blinking rapidly. "All of them, Governor. Every field on the planet that was treated with the yield enhancement microbes. The untreated fields are fine, but they only represent about 15% of our agricultural capacity." 15%, Thexara repeated. She threw the dead stalk onto the ground. "We cannot feed our population with 15%. "No, Governor." She turned to look at him. "Where did the microbes come from?" The minister consulted his datapad with trembling hands. "They were developed by a human biotechnology company, Vasquez Agricultural Solutions. We licensed them 30 years ago. The microbes modified the soil composition to increase nutrient absorption by 300%. And now they have stopped working? Worse than that, Governor. They appear to be dying. And as they die, they are releasing compounds that poison the soil around them. Our scientists believe that within another 2 months, the affected fields will be completely unable to support any plant life at all." Thexara felt a cold weight settling in her stomach. "Contact the company. Have them send technicians to fix this." The minister's nervous movements stopped. He became very still. "Governor," he said quietly, "Vasquez Agricultural Solutions closed its operations in council space 8 months ago, along with all other human businesses. They have not responded to any communication since then. Then contact the human government directly. We have tried. The communication relays in the rim sectors are not responding. We cannot reach human space." Thexara stared at him. "That is impossible. The quantum relay network covers the entire galaxy." "It did, Governor, but something is wrong with the network. Messages to the rim sectors are not going through. Our engineers do not understand why." The governor looked out over the dead fields stretching to the horizon. 15%. 15% of their food production would have to feed a population that had grown accustomed to abundance. There would be rationing, there would be hunger, there would be unrest. And this was just one planet in the HFY hegemony. 2 weeks later, the Velthari High Council received a report that would never be made public. The quantum relay network, the backbone of galactic communication, was failing. Not everywhere at once, not in any obvious pattern, but nodes were dropping offline, one by one, across the galaxy. Messages that should have arrived instantly were taking hours. Some were not arriving at all. The network had been designed by humans. That fact had been largely forgotten. The Velthari had paid for it, had claimed credit for it, had accepted the praise of a grateful galaxy for this marvel of technology that allowed instant communication across millions of light years. But the actual engineering, the actual construction, the actual maintenance, all of that had been done by human technicians working under Velthari supervision. Now those technicians were gone, and the engineers who remained did not understand how the network actually worked. "It should not be this complicated," said Chief Engineer Velthus, staring at the schematics displayed on the wall of his office. "It is just a communication system, quantum entanglement, relay amplification, standard protocols. We have been using these principles for thousands of years." His assistant, a young Velthari named Kiravel, pointed at a section of the diagram that was highlighted in red. "But this section, sir, none of our records explain what it does. The humans called it the coherence stabilization matrix. Our best physicists have been studying it for 2 weeks, and they cannot determine its function." "Then take it out," Velthus said impatiently. "If we do not understand it, it cannot be essential." "We tried that, sir. on a test relay. The moment we removed the matrix, the relay stopped functioning entirely. It did not just lose efficiency, it simply stopped working. Velthus turned to look at his assistant. That is not possible. You cannot have a system where a component is both incomprehensible and essential. Kiravel said nothing. She had learned that arguing with Chief Engineer Velthus was not productive. Find me someone who understands the system, Velthus said finally. There must be records, documentation, training materials, something. Sir, I have searched every database in the Velthari archives. The only documentation I could find said, for technical specifications, contact Human Engineering Corps, Relay Division. That division no longer exists. The chief engineer sat down heavily in his chair. For the first time in his long career, he did not know what to do. How bad will it get? He asked quietly. Kiravel consulted her datapad. At the current rate of degradation, we estimate that 40% of the network will be offline within 1 year. Within 3 years, we will be back to light-speed communication only. Messages between distant systems will take years or decades to arrive. The galaxy will fragment, Velthus said. Trade, diplomacy, everything depends on instant communication. Without it, he did not finish the sentence. He did not need to. The Morvathi Trade Consortium was the wealthiest organization in the galaxy. They had been moving goods between star systems for 8,000 years. Their shipping fleets were legendary, their trade routes were the arteries of galactic commerce, and their profits were beyond calculation. Consortium Chairman Morthel was reviewing the quarterly reports in his private office when his chief financial officer burst through the door without knocking. That alone told Morthel that something was very wrong. No one burst into the chairman's office. No one. What is the meaning of this? Morthel demanded. The CFO, a normally composed Morvathi named Belthas, was breathing hard. His normally gray skin had taken on a pale, almost white color. Chairman, we have a crisis. The insurance markets are collapsing. Morthel frowned. Insurance markets? What do insurance markets have to do with us? Everything, Chairman. Our entire shipping fleet is insured through the Galactic Transport Insurance Network. Without insurance, our ships cannot legally enter most ports. Without insurance, our cargo is not protected against loss. Without insurance, our clients will not ship with us. Then we will find new insurers. That is the problem, Chairman. There are no new insurers. The Galactic Transport Insurance Network was the only organization that provided full coverage for interstellar shipping, and 60% of that network was underwritten by human financial institutions. Morthel felt the blood drain from his own face. The humans. Yes, Chairman. When they withdrew from Council space, they also withdrew from all financial agreements. The insurance network has been operating on reserve funds for 6 months, but those reserves are now exhausted. As of this morning, the network has suspended all new policies and canceled all existing policies that come up for renewal. How many of our ships are affected? The CFO looked at his datapad, though he clearly already knew the answer. All of them, Chairman. Every single ship in our fleet. Morthel stood up and walked to the window of his office. From here, he could see the orbital shipyards where hundreds of Morvathi vessels were docked, loading and unloading cargo, preparing for journeys across the galaxy. What happens if they fly without insurance? He asked. Some ports will refuse them entry, others will impound them. Clients will refuse to ship with us because their goods will not be protected. And if anything goes wrong, if there is an accident or a pirate attack, we will bear the full cost ourselves. One major disaster could bankrupt the entire consortium. Morthel was silent for a long time. Contact the human financial institutions, he said finally. Offer them whatever they want to reinstate the agreements. I have tried, Chairman. We all have. The humans are not responding to any communications. Their financial centers in the rim sectors have gone dark. It is as if they have simply disappeared. The chairman turned away from the window. Then we will create our own insurance network. We have the resources. We have the expertise. The CFO shook his head. It would take decades to build the infrastructure, Chairman. We would need actuarial data, risk assessments, reserve funds, regulatory frameworks. The humans spent a century building the Galactic Transport Insurance Network. We cannot replace it overnight. Then what do you suggest? I do not have a suggestion, Chairman. I only have a warning. If we cannot solve this problem quickly, the entire galactic shipping industry will collapse. And when shipping stops, everything stops. Morthal sat back down in his chair. He suddenly felt very old. Why did no one see this coming? He asked. Why did no one realize how dependent we had become on human systems? The CFO had no answer. No one did. 3 months later, the first food riots broke out on Kethfor Prime. The grain shortages had become severe. Rationing had been implemented, but it was not enough. The population had grown accustomed to abundance, and they did not understand why that abundance had suddenly disappeared. They did not care about soil microbes or maintenance cycles or the departure of human technicians. They only knew that they were hungry and that their government had failed them. The riots started in the capital city and spread quickly to other population centers. The Kethfor military was deployed to restore order, but their soldiers were hungry too. Some of them joined the rioters, others simply walked away from their posts. Governor Thexara was evacuated to an orbital station as the violence spread. From orbit, she could see the fires burning in a dozen cities. She could see the chaos that was consuming her world. How did this happen? She asked no one in particular. We are one of the oldest civilizations in the galaxy. We have survived wars and plagues and natural disasters. How can we be brought down by microbes in the soil? Her aide, who had been with her since the beginning of the crisis, answered quietly. We did not survive those things alone, Governor. We had help. We had the resources of the galactic community. We had trade and cooperation and shared knowledge. We still have those things. The aide shook his head. Do we? The communication network is failing. The shipping routes are closing. Every species is turning inward, trying to solve their own problems. The galactic community is falling apart. Thexara stared at the burning planet below. Because the humans left. Because we never realized how much we needed them. We treated them like servants, like children, like guests. We never saw them as partners. We never asked them to teach us what they knew. We just used their work and took it for granted. And now we are paying the price. Yes, Governor, now we are paying the price. On a small station in Velthari space, far from the centers of power, a young communications technician named Saravan was working alone in the middle of the night. She had been trying to repair a failing quantum relay for weeks. She had read every manual, every technical document, every piece of information she could find, but nothing worked. The relay kept degrading, and she could not understand why. In desperation, she had begun searching through old archives, looking for anything that might help. And buried in a forgotten database, she had found something interesting. It was a video recording made 30 years ago. A human engineer was explaining the relay system to a group of Velthari trainees. The video was marked supplementary material, optional. Saravan watched it from beginning to end. Then she watched it again. And again. The human engineer was a woman with dark hair and a patient smile. She spoke simply, explaining complex concepts in ways that anyone could understand. She showed how the relay worked, not just what it did, but why it did it. She explained the coherence stabilization matrix that had baffled Velthari engineers for months. It's not complicated, the woman said in the video. It's just different from what you're used to. Human engineering tends to work with systems, not just components. Everything connects to everything else. You can't understand one part without understanding the whole. Saravan paused the video. She looked at the frozen image of the human woman, smiling at students who probably had not even been paying attention. Why did no one listen to you? She whispered. Why did no one learn? She knew the answer, of course. No one had listened because no one had thought they needed to. The Velthari were the oldest species in the galaxy. What could humans possibly teach them? Everything, it turned out. Humans could have taught them everything. Saravan turned back to her console. Using what she had learned from the video, she began to work on the relay again. And this time, for the first time in weeks, something started to make sense. It was a small victory. One relay, on one station, in the middle of nowhere. But it was a beginning. If only it had not come so late. High Arbiter Ketharon stood before the Galactic Council, his silver face betraying nothing of the turmoil in his mind. The reports had been coming in for months now. Crop failures, communication blackouts, shipping disruptions. Economic instability. Every species was struggling, and they were all looking to the Council for answers. But the Council had no answers. "We must find the humans," said Arbiter Vecthos of the Morvathi. "We must bring them back." "And how do you propose we do that?" Kethron asked coldly. "We cannot even contact them. Our ships cannot find their new settlements. They have retreated to parts of the galaxy that we never bothered to explore. Then we must explore them. With what ships? The shipping industry is paralyzed. Our own fleets are barely maintaining essential supply routes." Arbiter Thexivol of the Keith Force slammed her hand on her desk. "This is madness. 300 years we kept them at arm's length, and now we cannot survive without them? How is this possible?" "It is possible," Kethron said quietly, "because we were not paying attention. We were so certain of our superiority that we did not notice what was happening beneath our feet. The humans were building the foundations of our civilization, and we never even looked down." The chamber fell silent. "What do we do now?" someone asked. Kethron had no answer. For the first time in his 200 years as High Arbiter, he had no answer at all. The galaxy was falling apart, and the humans, the quiet, patient, stubborn humans, were nowhere to be found. They had walked away just as they had said they would, and now everyone else was learning what it meant to be alone. High Arbiter Kethron refused to hold a press conference. He refused to address the public. He refused to acknowledge in any official capacity that anything was wrong. The Velthari had ruled the galaxy for 12,000 years. They would not admit weakness now, not to the other species, not to their own people, not to anyone. Behind the closed doors of the council chamber, however, the panic was impossible to hide. "We must find them," Kethron said, his voice tight with frustration. "We must send envoys to human space and demand the return of shared galactic resources." "What shared resources?" asked Arbiter Morthal of the Morvathi. "Everything the humans built, they built with their own hands and their own minds. We merely licensed the results. We never owned any of it." "Then we will demand that they honor their contracts." They did honor their contracts, every single one. They completed all obligations and then chose not to renew. That is their right under galactic law. Kethron slammed his fist on the table. It was an uncharacteristic display of emotion for a Velthari, and it shocked the other arbiters into silence. "I will not accept this," he said. "I will not accept that a species barely out of their infancy can bring the greatest civilizations in the galaxy to their knees. I will not accept that we have been defeated by people we considered our inferiors." "No one has defeated us," said Arbiter Sarakhan of the Telmari. "The humans did not attack us. They did not sabotage our systems. They simply stopped helping us. The failure is our own. We became dependent on people we did not respect, and now we are paying the price for our arrogance." Kethron turned his glowing blue eyes on her. "You sound like you admire them." "I am beginning to," Sarakhan admitted. "They spent 3 centuries being treated as second-class citizens. They were taxed at triple rates. Their patents were taken from them. Their requests for equality were denied again and again. And through all of that, they kept working. They kept building. They kept making things better for everyone, even the people who looked down on them. And now they have abandoned us. No, now they have simply stopped doing our work for us. That is not the same thing." The chamber fell silent again. Outside, the stars burned cold and indifferent, as they always had. The Velthari diplomatic vessel arrived at the edge of human-controlled space 3 weeks later. It was the finest ship in the Velthari fleet, a massive cruiser designed to impress and intimidate. Its hull gleamed with silver light, and its engines left trails of blue fire across the darkness. Ambassador Velkroth stood on the bridge, watching the empty space ahead. According to all available records, there should have been a human colony here, a world called New Haven, with a population of 10 million, but sensors showed nothing. No ships, no stations, no settlements. Nothing but rocks and radiation. "They moved," said the ship's captain, stating the obvious. "They packed up everything and moved somewhere we do not have charts for." "Then we will find them," Velkroth said. "Extend the sensor range. Look for any sign of human activity." The captain hesitated. "Ambassador, the uncharted regions are vast. We could search for years and never find anything. And our fuel reserves are limited. The shipping crisis has made it difficult to obtain supplies. I do not care about difficulties. The Council has given me a mission, and I will complete it. They searched for 2 months. They followed faint energy signatures and distant radiation traces. They jumped from system to system, looking for any sign of the species that had seemingly vanished from the galaxy. They found nothing. Finally, their fuel nearly exhausted, they stumbled upon a small automated station orbiting a dead moon. It was clearly human-built, with the clean lines and efficient design that characterized human engineering. At last, Velkrath breathed. Approach the station, prepare a boarding party. But when they tried to dock, a holographic message appeared on their screens. A human woman, middle-aged and calm, speaking in perfect Velthari. This is an automated border station of the Human Confederacy. Unauthorized vessels are not permitted to proceed beyond this point. If you wish to communicate with human authorities, please leave a message. Your message will be reviewed and, if appropriate, a response will be sent. Thank you for your understanding. The message ended. The station went dark. Velkrath ordered his communications officer to send a message. He identified himself as an official representative of the Galactic Council. He demanded, in the strongest possible terms, an immediate audience with human leadership. He warned of consequences if his demands were not met. There was no response. He sent another message, and another. He waited for days, his ship floating in the emptiness, while his crew grew restless and his fuel reserves dropped lower and lower. Nothing. The humans had simply stopped talking. Back in Council space, the crisis was deepening. The quantum relay network had degraded to the point where real-time communication was only possible within individual star systems. Messages between systems took days or weeks, traveling the old-fashioned way on ships equipped with faster-than-light drives. The galaxy, which had felt small and connected for centuries, was becoming vast and lonely again. The Morvathi Trade Consortium had collapsed. Without insurance, without reliable communication, without the infrastructure that had made interstellar commerce possible, the great shipping fleets sat idle in their ports. Some captains tried to continue operating independently, but without the support systems they had always relied upon, most of them failed. Ships broke down with no one to repair them. Cargoes were lost to pirates who no longer feared prosecution. Crews mutinied when their pay stopped coming. The Keth-4 hegemony was in the midst of a full-scale famine. The soil microbe crisis had spread from agricultural worlds to terraformed colonies that depended on imported food. Billions of beings were going hungry. The government had fallen twice in the past year, and the current administration was held together only by military force. And then the plagues began. It started on a medical research station in Telmari space. The station had been conducting studies on a new viral strain, using containment protocols developed by human biohazard specialists. When the human specialists left, the local staff had continued the research, confident that they understood the procedures. They did not. The virus escaped containment. Within days, it had spread to the station's entire population. Within weeks, it had reached 3 nearby colonies. Within months, it was burning through the Telmari Confederation like fire through dry grass. The virus was not normally fatal to Telmari, but the treatment protocols, like so many other things, had been developed by human medical researchers. Without access to those researchers, without the ability to communicate quickly with medical experts across the galaxy, the Telmari were fighting blind. They lost. 200 million Telmari died in the first year of the plague. Another 100 million died in the second year, as the virus mutated into new forms that the failing medical infrastructure could not track. By the third year, the Telmari Confederation had effectively ceased to exist. The survivors retreated to isolated colonies, cutting off all contact with the outside world in a desperate attempt to stop the spread. The Galactic Council held an emergency session. For the first time in its history, one of the seats in the Great Hall was empty. The Velthari tried force. It was Kethron's idea. He had grown tired of sending diplomats who were ignored and messages that were never answered. The humans had humiliated the Council, and they needed to be taught a lesson. Even if that lesson had to be delivered at the point of a weapon. A battle fleet was assembled. 50 warships, the finest the Velthari possessed, with enough firepower to destroy a dozen worlds. They were sent to the border region where the automated station had been found, with orders to proceed into human space and secure vital resources. No one asked what those vital resources were or how they would be secured. No one wanted to think too hard about what they were actually doing. The fleet jumped into the border system and found nothing. The automated station was gone, moved or destroyed, or simply switched off. The space ahead was empty. Fleet Admiral Kethval ordered his ships to proceed. They jumped again, deeper into uncharted territory. And again, and again. They found abandoned colonies, cities that had been carefully dismantled, stripped of anything useful, and left to rust. Orbital stations with empty docks and silent corridors. Agricultural worlds where the crops had been harvested and the fields left fallow. The humans had not just retreated, they had erased themselves. Every trace of their presence, every sign of their civilization, had been methodically removed. "They knew we would come," said the admiral's second-in-command, standing on the bridge of the flagship as they surveyed yet another empty world. "They knew we would try to take what they had built, so they took it with them." "That is impossible," Admiral Kethval said. "You cannot move an entire civilization. You cannot pack up billions of people and disappear into the void." "And yet they have done it. There is nothing here, Admiral. Nothing for us to take, nothing for us to threaten, nothing for us to attack." The Admiral stared at the empty planet below. He had been prepared for battle. He had been prepared for negotiation. He had even been prepared for surrender. He had not been prepared for this. There was no enemy to fight. There was no one to talk to. There was just silence, vast and absolute, stretching out in every direction. "Take us home," he said finally. "There is nothing for us here." The fleet returned to Council space empty-handed. Kethron was furious, but there was nothing he could do. You cannot wage war against people who refuse to exist. The crisis continued to deepen. Power grids failed on stations built with human fusion cores. Water purification systems broke down on worlds that had relied on human environmental engineering. Manufacturing facilities ground to a halt when the automated systems that human programmers had designed stopped receiving maintenance updates. One by one, the pillars that held up galactic civilization began to crack. The Morvathi worlds descended into chaos as the economic collapse spread beyond the shipping industry. Banks failed. Currencies became worthless. The elaborate system of trade and finance that had made the Morvathi wealthy became a trap that destroyed them. The Kethvor Civil War began when the military government tried to seize food supplies from provinces that were still producing. The provinces fought back. Other provinces joined in. Within months, the hegemony had fractured into a dozen warring states, each fighting for survival. The Velthari, for all their age and wisdom, fared little better. Their civilization had become brittle over the centuries, dependent on systems and technologies they no longer understood. When those systems began to fail, they had no way to adapt. Younger Velthari, who had never known anything but comfort and plenty, did not know how to survive in a galaxy that no longer provided everything they needed. High Arbiter Ketharon watched his world crumbling around him. He had ruled for 200 years, guiding the galaxy through challenges that had seemed insurmountable at the time. But this challenge was different. This challenge was not an enemy that could be defeated or a problem that could be solved. This challenge was the absence of people he had never valued, doing work he had never noticed, building things he had never appreciated. He had called humans guests. He had told them they did not deserve a seat at the table. He had believed with absolute certainty that the galaxy would be better off without them. He had been wrong. The realization came to him slowly, over months of watching everything he had built fall apart. It came in the form of reports from failing colonies and dying worlds. It came in the faces of his advisors, who no longer had advice to give. It came in the silence of the quantum relay network, which had once connected 100 billion beings across 1 million worlds. He had been wrong about the humans, wrong about their value, wrong about their place in the galaxy, wrong about everything. But the knowledge came too late. The damage was done, and the humans were gone, vanished into the unexplored regions of space, beyond the reach of apologies or pleas or threats. Kethron stood alone in the great hall of the council, looking up at the empty seats where his fellow arbiters had once sat. Some had died. Some had fled. Some had simply stopped coming, too overwhelmed by the crises in their own territories to spare time for galactic governance. "We did this to ourselves," he said to the empty room. "We pushed them away. We treated them like dirt, and now we are learning what dirt feels like." His voice echoed in the vast space, unanswered. Outside, the stars continued to burn, as they always had. But the galaxy that had seemed so eternal, so unchanging, was falling apart, and there was no one left to fix it. The humans had walked away quietly, and the consequences of that quiet departure were louder than any war. The assassination of High Arbiter Kethran was not a surprise to anyone who had been paying attention. What was surprising was how long it had taken. He was killed in his private chambers by 3 of his own advisors. They used a traditional Velthari ceremonial blade, the kind that was supposed to be used only for ritual purposes. It was a symbol, they said later, a way of showing that the old order was being cut away. The advisors made no attempt to escape. They waited calmly for the security forces to arrive, and then surrendered without resistance. When asked why they had done it, they gave the same answer. Kethron had destroyed the galaxy with his arrogance, and he had to pay the price. The news spread slowly, hampered by the failing communication network, but it spread, and when it reached the other species, the reaction was not outrage or horror. It was quiet acknowledgement. "Yes," they said, "he deserved it. He brought this upon all of us." The Galactic Council did not survive Kethron's death. It had been dying for years, ever since the humans left. But his assassination was the final blow. The remaining arbiters could not agree on a successor. They could not agree on anything. Each one blamed the others for the catastrophe that had befallen their worlds. The last official meeting of the council ended in a shouting match. Arbiter Morthal of the Morvathi accused the Velthari of using their position to enrich themselves at the expense of other species. The Velthari representative, a young diplomat who had replaced Kethron, accused the Morvathi of collapsing the galactic economy through incompetent management. The Kethvor representative did not speak at all. He simply stood up, walked out of the chamber, and never returned. The Great Hall, which had witnessed 12,000 years of galactic history, fell silent. The lights dimmed as power was diverted to more essential systems. The crystal walls, which had once glittered with the light of 3 suns, grew dark and cold. An era had ended. On a small, rocky moon at the edge of what had once been Morvathi space, a ship landed. It was not a warship or a cargo hauler or a diplomatic cruiser. It was a simple transport vessel, barely large enough to hold a dozen passengers and their supplies. The moon had no official name. It was just a number in a catalog, one of millions of barren rocks that no one had ever bothered to claim. But someone had built something here, a small structure, half buried in the gray dust, with lights that glowed faintly through tiny windows. A Morvathi stepped out of the transport ship. Her name was Velzara, and she had once been a junior trade negotiator for the consortium. Now she was simply a survivor, one of millions who had fled the chaos of the core worlds seeking something, anything that might offer hope. She had heard a rumor. A story passed from ship to ship in the refugee camps and abandoned stations. A story about a place where humans still lived, where the lights still worked and the food still grew and the old system still functioned. Most people dismissed it as a fantasy, a dream for desperate people who had nothing left to believe in. But Valsera had spent months tracking the rumor to its source, following fragments of information through the wreckage of civilization. And now she was here. She walked toward the structure, her feet crunching on the dusty ground. As she approached, a door opened, and a figure stepped out to meet her. It was a human. A woman, perhaps 40 years old, with brown hair and eyes that looked tired, but kind. She wore simple clothing and carried no weapons. She looked at Velsara without surprise, as if she had been expecting her. "You are far from home," the woman said in accented Morvathi. "I have no home," Velsara replied. "None of us do. Not anymore." The woman nodded slowly. "I know. We have been watching. We have seen what is happening in council space. Then you know why I am here. I am looking for help. My people are dying. Our worlds are falling apart. We have nowhere else to turn." "You could turn to each other," to the other species who are suffering as you are. Velsera laughed, but there was no humor in it. We have tried. We are too busy blaming each other, too busy fighting over the scraps of what remains. We do not know how to work together. We never did. We always relied on... She stopped, unable to finish the sentence. On us, the woman said quietly. You relied on us to do the hard work, to solve the problems, to keep everything running while you took the credit. Yes. Velsara's voice was barely a whisper. Yes, we did, and we were wrong. We were stupid and arrogant and wrong. She dropped to her knees in the dust. It was not a calculated gesture. It was simply that her legs would no longer hold her up. Please, she said, I am not asking for my government or my people's pride. I am asking for the children who are starving because we cannot grow food. I am asking for the sick who are dying because we cannot make medicine. I am asking for everyone who did not choose this, who did not vote for the arbiters, or make the decisions that brought us here. The human woman was silent for a long moment. Then she reached down and took Velsara's hand, helping her to her feet. Come inside, she said. There is someone you need to talk to. The interior of the structure was larger than it appeared from outside. It extended deep into the rock of the moon, a complex of tunnels and chambers that hummed with quiet activity. Velsara saw humans working at consoles, tending to equipment, moving with the calm efficiency she remembered from before the Exodus. The woman led her through the corridors to a central chamber. It was a simple room with a table and chairs and screens on the walls showing data that Velsara could not interpret. At the table sat another human, older than the first, with gray hair and deep lines on her face. Velsara recognized her immediately. Ambassador Vasquez, she breathed. Elena Vasquez, former ambassador to the Galactic Council, now president of the Human Confederacy, looked up from the documents she had been reading. Her eyes met Velsara's, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. Please sit down, Elena said finally. You have come a long way. Velsara sat. Her hands were trembling. I remember you, Elena said. You were at the council chamber once, many years ago, a young trade delegate, learning the business. You were one of the few who actually looked at me when I spoke. Most of them did not bother. I remember too, Velsara said. I remember thinking that you seemed tired, that you had given the same speech many times before. I had. For 20 years I stood in that chamber and asked for the same things. Equal treatment, fair consideration, a chance to prove our worth. And for 20 years I was told to wait, to be patient, to remember my place. And now you are here, Velsara said, safe and hidden while the rest of the galaxy burns. Yes. Elena did not flinch from the accusation. We are here. We are safe. We are not burning. Is that justice? Is that what you wanted? Elena was quiet for a long time. When she spoke again, her voice was soft. I never wanted this. None of us did. We wanted to be part of the galactic community. We wanted to contribute, to help, to make things better for everyone. We were proud of the work we did, the technologies we created, the systems we built. We thought that if we worked hard enough, if we proved ourselves valuable enough, we would eventually be accepted. She stood up and walked to one of the screens on the wall. It showed a map of the galaxy, with areas marked in different colors. But we learned something important. We learned that some people will never accept you, no matter what you do. They will always see you as inferior. They will always find reasons to keep you down. And if you stay and try to change their minds, you will spend your whole life being diminished. She turned back to Velsara. So we left. We did not fight. We did not argue. We simply took our work and our knowledge and our dreams. And we went somewhere where we could build something new, something that was ours. And you let us suffer. We let you experience the consequences of your choices. That is not the same thing. Elena's eyes were hard now. For 300 years, we asked for fairness. For 300 years, we were refused. When we left, we owed the council nothing. We had fulfilled every obligation. We had honored every contract. We walked away clean, with nothing but what we had earned. But you knew what would happen. You knew we could not survive without you. Yes, we knew. And we hoped, desperately hoped, that the crisis would make you reconsider, that you would reach out to each other, that you would learn to solve your own problems instead of depending on species you despise to solve them for you. We did not learn. No, you did not. Velsara felt tears on her face. She did not know when she had started crying. So what happens now, she asked. Do you watch us die? Do you wait until we are all gone, and then emerge to inherit the empty galaxy? Elena walked back to the table and sat down across from Velsara. She reached out and took the Morvathi woman's hand in her own. No, she said. That is not who we are. We are not cruel. We do not want revenge. We never did. Then what do you want? We want what we have always wanted, to be partners, to work together as equals, to build something that benefits everyone, not just the species who were born first or accumulated the most power. She squeezed Velsara's hand. We will help those who ask, but not as masters and servants, not as superiors and inferiors. If you come to us as equals, admitting your mistakes and committed to doing better, we will welcome you. We will share what we have. We will help you rebuild. And if we do not, then we will continue to live our own lives in our own corner of the galaxy, and we will be sad for what might have been. But we will not force ourselves on people who do not want us. We learned that lesson long ago. Velsara looked down at their joined hands. Human and Morvathi, two species that had barely spoken to each other for centuries. The council called you guests, she said. Yes, they were wrong. Yes, they were. I am sorry. The words came out broken, barely coherent. I am sorry for what we did, for what we failed to do, for all of it. Elena smiled. It was a small smile, tired and sad, but genuine. I know, she said, and that is a beginning. Velsara returned to what remained of Morvathi's space with a message. It was not a demand or a threat or a promise of salvation. It was simply an invitation. Any species that wished to join the new compact could do so. The terms were simple: full partnership, mutual respect, shared governance, no hierarchy, no probationary status, no distinction between old species and young ones. The Morvathi were the first to accept. They had lost everything: their wealth, their pride, their place in the galaxy. They had nothing left to lose by admitting they had been wrong. Others followed. The Telmari survivors, emerging from their isolation. The smaller species who had always been overshadowed by the elder races. Even some of the Keth-4 factions, desperate for stability in the midst of their civil war. One by one, they came to the rim. They found the human settlements, now vast and thriving, built with the same quiet efficiency that had characterized human work for centuries. They found people who were willing to teach instead of dictate, to share instead of exploit, to build together instead of ruling from above. It was not easy. There were old resentments to overcome, old patterns of behavior to unlearn, old prejudices to confront. But slowly, painfully, a new community began to form. And in the ruins of the Galactic Council, the Velthari watched and waited. They were still proud, still convinced of their own superiority, still unable to believe that the galaxy they had ruled for 12,000 years was truly gone. But the galaxy did not care what they believed. The galaxy was moving on without them. 20 years had passed since the fall of the Galactic Council. The Great Hall still stood, floating in the space between three star systems, but it was no longer a seat of power. The silver walls had been cleaned and restored, the crystal towers repaired, the lighting systems replaced with modern human-designed technology that actually worked reliably. But it was no longer called the Council Chamber. It was a museum now. Visitors came from across the galaxy to walk through the vast space where 12 species had once ruled over 100 others. They looked at the elevated seats where the arbiters had sat in judgment. They read the plaques that explained the history of the building and the civilization it represented. They stood in the center of the floor, in the circle of light where countless ambassadors had stood and begged for recognition. And then they went home to worlds that were changing in ways the old council could never have imagined. The cooperative assembly met in a different building now. It was smaller than the old council chamber and less impressive. There were no crystal towers or silver walls, just a simple circular room with a round table in the middle, large enough for representatives of all the member species to sit together at the same level. No elevated seats, no hierarchy, no species looking down on any other. President Elena Vasquez, now in her 80s, still attended the assembly sessions. Her hair had gone completely white, and she walked with a cane, but her eyes were as sharp as ever. She sat at the round table next to the Morvati representative, who happened to be Velsara, the same woman who had come to that small outpost on a barren moon 20 years ago. Today was a special session. The assembly was receiving a petition from a species that had never petitioned before, the Velthari. For 20 years, the Velthari had refused to join the new compact. They had retreated to their core worlds, sealed their borders, and tried to rebuild their civilization on their own. They had told themselves that they did not need help from inferior species, that their 12,000 years of history had given them the knowledge and resources to survive anything. They had been wrong. Their population had declined by 60%. Their technology had degraded to the point where they could barely maintain basic life support on their remaining colonies. Their society had fragmented into competing factions, each claiming to represent the true legacy of Velthari civilization, and now finally they had come to ask for help. The Velthari representative stood at the edge of the round table. He was young by Velthari standards, barely 300 years old. His silver skin was dull, lacking the healthy sheen that Velthari were supposed to have. His glowing blue eyes were dim. He looked like what he was, the remnant of a dying civilization. His name was Kethval. He was the great-grandson of High Arbiter Kethron. Members of the Cooperative Assembly, he said, his voice formal and careful, I come before you today on behalf of the Velthari people. I come with a request that my ancestors would have found impossible to imagine. I come to ask for your help. The chamber was silent. Representatives from dozens of species watched the Velthari man with expressions ranging from curiosity to hostility to pity. For 12,000 years, the Velthari believed that we were the masters of this galaxy, Kethval continued. We built the council. We made the laws. We decided who was worthy and who was not. We looked at the other species around us and saw children, inferiors, beings who needed our guidance and supervision. He paused, his dim eyes moving around the room. We believed that strength came from dominion, from control, from the power to decide the fates of others. We believed that because we were the oldest, we were the wisest. Because we had survived the longest, we deserved to rule. We were fools. The word hung in the air. Several representatives shifted in their seats, but no one spoke. 20 years ago, when the humans left, we thought it was a victory. We thought we had finally put them in their place. We did not understand that they had been holding our civilization together. We did not understand that the things we took for granted, the systems we depended upon, the technologies we used every day, had been built and maintained by people we considered our inferiors. And when they left, everything fell apart. Kethval's voice cracked slightly, but he pressed on. I will not describe in detail what has happened to my people. You know the stories. You know about the famines and the plagues and the civil wars. You know about the billions who have died because we were too proud to ask for help. You know about the children who will never be born because my species is dying. He looked directly at Elena Vasquez. My great-grandfather stood in the old council chamber and told your ambassador that humans were guests, that guests do not demand seats at the table, that you needed to learn your place. He was wrong. He was catastrophically, unforgivably wrong, and my people have paid for his arrogance with our future. He bowed his head. I am not here to demand anything. I am not here to remind you of past agreements or invoke old treaties. I am here to ask, as humbly as I know how, for the chance to join your community. To learn what we should have learned centuries ago. To become partners instead of rulers. He raised his head again. I do not expect forgiveness. I do not expect kindness. I expect only what we deserve, which is nothing at all. But I am asking anyway because my people are dying, and I do not know what else to do. The chamber remained silent for a long moment after he finished speaking. Then Elena Vasquez stood up. It took her a moment, leaning on her cane, but she rose to her full height and looked at the young Velthari across the table. 20 years ago, she said, I told a Morvati woman that we would help those who came to us as equals, admitting their mistakes, committed to doing better. She walked slowly around the table, her cane tapping against the floor with each step. You have admitted your mistakes, more honestly and completely than I ever expected to hear from a Velthari. That took courage. That took humility. Those are qualities that your ancestors did not possess. She stopped in front of Kethvil. But admission is not enough. Anyone can say they are sorry when they are desperate. The question is whether you truly understand what went wrong. Not just what happened, but why it happened. Not just that you made mistakes, but what those mistakes were. Kethvil met her eyes. We believed ourselves the masters of this galaxy. We believed that strength came from dominion. And we were wrong. He paused, searching for words. Strength does not come from standing above others. It comes from standing beside them. It comes from the bonds you build with people who are different from you. It comes from the willingness to give without expecting to receive. Humanity taught us that, not through conquest, not through war, simply by leaving, by showing us what it was like to live without the people we had treated as less than ourselves. Elena nodded slowly. You are beginning to understand, she said. That is good. But understanding is only the first step. The real work comes after. The work of changing how you think, how you act, how you treat the beings around you. Are you willing to do that work? Yes. Even when it is hard. Even when your instincts tell you that you are superior, that you know better, that you deserve more? Yes. Even when other species do not trust you? When they remember what your ancestors did and judge you by their actions? Kethvil's voice was steady. Yes, we will earn their trust. However long it takes, whatever it requires, we will do the work. Elena studied his face for a long moment. Then she smiled. It was a warm smile, one that reached her tired eyes. The measure of a species is not how it treats those beneath it, she said. It is whether it believes anyone is beneath it at all. She turned to face the rest of the assembly. I move that the Velthari petition for membership in the Cooperative Assembly be accepted. They have admitted their mistakes. They have committed to change. They are asking to join us not as rulers, but as partners. That is all any of us can ask of each other. The vote was not unanimous. Some representatives still held grudges. Some species had suffered too much to forgive easily. But the majority voted in favor, and the motion passed. Kethval of the Velthari took his place at the round table. For the first time in 20 years, all 12 of the former council species were represented in the same room. But they were not sitting in elevated seats looking down at the others. They were sitting at a round table, equal to everyone else. Elena Vasquez returned to her own seat, her joints aching from the walk, but her heart lighter than it had been in years. Welcome to the assembly, she said. Let us build something better together. After the session ended, Elena walked slowly through the corridors of the assembly building. She passed windows that looked out on the stars, now more accessible than ever thanks to the technologies that humans and their partners had developed over the past 2 decades. The galaxy was healing. The quantum relay network had been rebuilt, better and more reliable than before. The shipping routes had been restored. The famines and plagues had been brought under control. Species that had been dying were now growing again. It was not perfect. There were still conflicts, still disagreements, still old wounds that had not fully healed. But it was better. It was moving in the right direction. Velsera found her in a quiet corner of the building, looking out at the distant stars. You did a good thing today, the Morvathi woman said. I did what needed to be done. Some of the other representatives were not happy. They wanted the Velthari to suffer more, to be punished for what they did. Elena sighed. I understand the impulse. I felt it too for many years. The anger, the desire for revenge, the satisfaction of watching those who hurt you finally experience the consequences of their actions. But revenge does not build anything. It only destroys, and we have had enough destruction. She turned to face Velsera. Do you know what I learned in all my years as a diplomat? I learned that the most powerful thing you can do is not to hurt your enemies. It is to make them realize, truly realize, that they were wrong. Not because you forced them to admit it, not because you punished them until they submitted, but because they saw the truth for themselves. That is what happened today. Kethval understood, really understood, what his ancestors had done wrong. Not because we made him suffer, because he saw the results of their arrogance and recognized it for what it was. Velsara nodded slowly. And you think that understanding will last? You think the Velthari will truly change? I do not know. People are complicated. Species are even more complicated. But I know that change is possible. I have seen it happen. I have seen enemies become friends. I have seen pride give way to humility. I have seen civilizations that seemed destined to fail find new paths forward. She smiled. And I know this. If we had refused them today, if we had turned them away out of anger and resentment, we would have become exactly what they once were. We would have become the masters looking down at the inferiors, and that would have destroyed everything we have built. Velsara was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You never fired a shot." "What?" "In all of this, in everything that happened, humanity never fired a shot. You never attacked anyone. You never destroyed anything. You simply walked away and let the galaxy discover what it had lost.